All right, folks, you're live.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Deborah Miles, and I'm co-chair along with Ms. Lynn Simmons of the Vance Monument Task Force for the City of Asheville and Buncombe County. I want to welcome everyone on this day, Thursday, October 15th at 4:30, and it is now time to commence our meeting. And the first thing that I want to do, order of business, is to inform the committee and the community, for those who are listening, that I regret to say that one of our task force members, Carmen Ramos Kennedy, has resigned due to unforeseen circumstances, and we are very sad to receive that resignation. At this point, we are happy to welcome the first alternate from Buncombe County, Dennis Bagnett, who will move into a task force member. So welcome, Dennis. Glad you're here. The next order of business is to do our roll call. So if you will say here when I call your name, we'll get through that pretty quickly. Co-chair Orleen Simmons.
Here.
Catherine Cutshall.
Here.
Dennis Bagnett.
Here.
Savannah Gibson. Savannah Gibson. Lonnie Gilliam. I know that Lonnie told me he was not going to be able to attend today. Liz Harper.
Here.
Betsy Hutchinson.
Here.
David King.
Here.
Bernard Oliphant. Bernard Oliphant. Ben Scales.
Here.
Shirley W. Whitesides.
Here.
Alternate Andrea Olson.
Here.
Great. And I did not hear from Savannah Gibson or Bernard Oliphant.
I'm here.
Great. Wonderful. Welcome, Savannah. Mr. Oliphant? Okay. If anybody sees him come on, would somebody just say so in the chat, and I'll go back and do that. All right. Ms. Simmons, was this? Oh, now we got to do the minutes. Thank you. I hope that folks have had a chance to review the minutes from last week. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes as read, or does anyone have any corrections they would like to make first? Wonderful. Do I hear a motion to accept them? Say your name.
So moved.
And who was that?
David King. So moved.
Thank you. Do I hear a second? And please state your name.
Liz Harper, seconded.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to accept the minutes from October the 8th as read. And now we will do the roll call. So please say yay or yes or no. Orleen Simmons.
Yay.
Catherine Cutshall.
Yay.
Dennis Bagnett.
Yay.
Savannah Gibson.
Yay.
Liz Harper.
Yay.
Essie Hutchinson.
Yes.
David King.
Present.
Bernard Oliphant. Ben Scales.
Yay. Yay.
Shirley W. Whitesides.
Yay.
Thank you. So the minutes are accepted as read. Ms. Simmons, is this where you wanted me to move on to between the A and the B?
Sure. task force members, you have received your agendas, which have been distributed. We will follow that agenda this evening, and we will adjourn at 5:30 p.m.
And I think at this point, were we going to hear something from the attorneys for the scope of, or am I misreading that?
I think that was the part in the agenda, just to offer any reflections to the statement or the context you provided, Deb, to the task force. That was sent out on Tuesday.
Right.
So, yeah.
Brad, would you be able to respond to the statement you made around the legal issues that we are to consider or not to consider?
Certainly, Ms. Miles, I can do that. And thank you, everyone, again, for having me here tonight. Happy to assist in this in any capacity that you need me. Just to give some quick recounting of the task which this task force has been charged with, both the City Council and the County Commission, through their joint resolution, specifically enumerated the primary 3 options that are to be considered for the Vance Monument. Those include relocation, removal, or repurposing, or certainly there is always the 4th option, which is doing nothing with the monument. However, we listed the primary 3 options, which would all involve some specific action. Now, certainly, you could go further on these, and I think your discussions have reflected that you are considering some of these things more deeply. There is certainly time limitations that this task force is restricted by, which I think would add a practical reason for you to focus primarily on those high-level options. I do not believe that there is anything wrong with giving some deeper consideration to what any of the particular options might look like in terms of making your primary recommendation. However, I do believe that it is the goal of both the County Commission and the City Council, without specifically speaking for them, but just my interpretation of the joint resolution, that your primary goal is to offer a recommendation amongst the primary options. If you do decide to do something with the monument, to focus primarily on relocation, removal, or repurposing. And happy to answer any additional questions about that, or Ms. Miles, if there's anything else you'd like me to cover.
I think there was the question particularly about, are we limited by any legal, do we take that in
Certainly.
any legal issues into consideration as we determine the pros and cons of the monuments?
Absolutely. If you all will recall, during your first meeting, Mr. Frew and I provided a very quick sort of legal rundown of some of the framework, or what is perhaps better described as the legal guardrails in which you are driving. Now, we do not want to burden this task force with becoming experts on what could in some cases be fairly complex legal issues. Please rest assured that the County Commission and the City Council will receive full legal briefings about whatever action they either determine to take or what they consider as a possibility to take. We will, myself and Michael Frew, answer any questions that you have, or are happy to reiterate some of the legalities that we shared with you early on. But we hope that this task force will not worry too much about those. All of the options that were mentioned to you in the joint resolution have been considered. And although each of those have certain legal consequences and considerations, we believe that all of them are possible actions that can be taken. So feel free to consider each one of those without being overly burdened with legal considerations, and know that any additional information can be provided in response to any questions that you may have, but the governing boards will receive full legal briefing on whatever the recommendation is that comes out of this board.
Thank you. And with that, I would like to turn this meeting over to Cortina.
Oh, can I ask a question of the lawyer,
Sure.
please?
Sure.
Hi, Mr. Brown. Ben Scales here. I'm just a little confused as to, well, for example, if we choose to remove, there would be a completely different set of legal things that would go on. And I'm sorry, I can't divorce myself from my legal training and say, I want to work on a task force that's going to recommend something without concern for whether it's legal or not. And this leads into the other one about financial implications, without knowing whether it's financially feasible. And I wrote a note to the co-chairs. I said it's like a kid making a Santa Claus list. You know, I don't care how much it costs. I don't care if it's legal or illegal. This is what I want. And I'm concerned if that's what the city is and the county is offloading to us, to this decision-making body, to this advisory group, then I just want clarification on that. And I guess a more specific question would be: have you mapped out the different costs of defending the decision that the decision to remove is going to cost a certain amount of legal time and effort, whereas repurposing may not take anything legal? So to have those two options and not consider the legal ramifications is disturbing to me. And I'll shut up and let you answer. Sorry.
And thank you for that, Mr. Scales. I would certainly say that those are very fair points and very good questions that certainly someone with legal training is trained to ask. So I completely understand where you're coming from on that. Let me answer by saying that at this point, without disclosing any of the confidential legal conversations that Mr. Frew and I have had with our clients, in drafting the resolution under which this organization or this task force has been charged, we believe that the legal circumstances exist presently for all of the options to move forward. Now, again, without going into more detail about each individual one, and certainly without going into detail about what the specific recommendation might be, it's a little bit speculative for us at this point to get too in-depth on either the issue of cost or on the issue of potential legal challenges. Now, rest assured that we have given quite a bit of thought of that, to that, and we have been dealing with attorneys from around the state, as well as attorneys who purport to recommend or represent organizations who may foster a challenge on some of these issues. We do not want to have this particular task force be pulled in too many directions with regard to fulfilling the primary task that you have been given. Now, I understand completely that it is impossible for a thoughtful mind to divorce itself entirely from the issue of cost, whether that be in the form of the action or in any sort of legal defense. Completely understand that. And perhaps a better way for me to say it is, instead of saying disregard it, to say focus on the level of specificity that we believe is appropriate for this particular body. We would certainly want you to pay attention if your recommendation was to repurpose by covering the whole thing in diamonds. I think everybody has some idea that that might be cost prohibitive at a certain point. However, we don't want you to be so concerned about a potential legal challenge of one option versus another, because I will have to say at this point, we don't know. Any challenge could arise based upon a variety of circumstances on really almost any of these options. And as an attorney, you would know well, as myself, that trying to estimate how those challenges would actually play out in the form of costs, very, very difficult. And saddling this group with that, I think, would be unfair and quite frankly, something that might hinder your ability to best perform your task. So please do not feel as if you should turn a complete blind eye to the issues of cost. But I would say perhaps restrict yourselves to getting too bogged down by it. We, myself, Michael, and I, and our legal teams are here very specifically to try our very best to facilitate the final direction given by our governing boards at the recommendation of this body. And certainly that's going to have some legal effect. What we don't want to do is draw those conclusions too early, because it truly gets in the way of what you as a selected group are trying to do. We want to take your recommendation, provide that to the governing boards, allow them to formulate the policy decisions, and at that point, provide them the sufficient legal information and recommendations to guide how to go about those particular instances. I fully am of the opinion that you have the ability to do each one of the options provided to you. I certainly cannot guarantee that someone out there may not wish to challenge those things, and there may be some cost. It is also true that some of these options are going to cost more than others. Do not completely forget that. I think that that should be one variable in your calculus. However, getting too in depth with that, I think, may restrict what you're able to do in the time that you've been allotted. So hopefully that provided some additional context. It is always difficult to be an attorney representing someone else and trying to assist someone who I don't represent, but rest assured that City Council is, and I'm sure County Commission is being fully informed, or they would not have provided you with these options in the first place.
Thank you.
Just one follow-up. So you don't represent us. You don't represent the task force?
I technically don't represent you in a legal capacity, in a attorney-client capacity. I represent the city as Michael represents the county only as entities. This body is an independent advisory one, which means that although we are here to assist as staff support in a legal capacity, we would not have enjoyed the same sort of attorney-client relationship that we have with our independent entities.
Thank you so much, Brad. Ben, did you have anything else? You're good. Thank you so much. Thank you all for that great discussion, and good afternoon for those tuning in from wherever you are. Again, my name is Cortina. I'll be facilitating us through our agenda this afternoon, and also want to acknowledge that we've already started in our discussion about process, which is great. So we'll have about another 15 minutes or so here, and then we're going to move into talking specifically about the layout of design for the town halls that will be kicking off next week and also taking place on the 29th. We have some things from the community engagement team to reflect back to you all as a task force, get your input, and make sure that we can go ahead and move those things along so that we can send out community invitations. And as always, we'll just kind of take a moment to see if there are any major action items that we need to have convened between now and the next meeting. And then we, as the team with the co-chairs and the staff team, we meet on Friday. So if there is anything that anybody has to share or would like to see us follow up on, please just let me know. And then, as co-chair Simmons has already named, this meeting will adjourn at 5:30 for the public meeting, and the small groups that you all have been assigned to, which I'll share again what those are if needed, but you all have been sent an individual invitation to follow that link at the adjournment of this meeting, which we're going to strive for 5:30 for that. So that's just a little bit about the flow for today's meeting. That being said, I do want to just take a moment to share back some progress from the last meeting, some action items that we talked about. We did go over the timeline and the progress notes pretty in detail, so I won't go over those line by line, but just to share back with you all that I have heard back from Rashida McDaniels, who we heard from last week, part of the Buncombe County team, about the conversation in community that she held last Friday, the 9th. I'm told that there was about 22 people present on that call from community. Also that task force member Shirley W. Whitesides was present and was able to listen and be available for that conversation. So thank you for that. And I had asked Rashida if that was going to be a one-time meeting just to get clarity. And I believe that was the one-time meeting to kind of drive people to go to the public input page and continue to leave their comments and their insights, which have continued to grow, as you all have seen from the public comments compilation so far this week. We will be, as we talked about, having the the virtual town hall meetings. As you all decided last meeting, those will be solely virtual. In just a moment, we'll share the graphic with you all to kind of see if there's anything that needs to be stated or said. And the hope is that that can go out on social media and also via email to your networks, people that we want to make sure we're hearing from, and the community engagement team will also send that out. We've also started the conversation about the laptops, and so I'm in touch with Nia and Catherine, and also have, since the last meeting, compiled a list of about 24 community locations that should touch into some of those communities that you all wanted to hear from, like in Leicester and Weaverville, and Black Mountain, Swannanoa. The plan that we talked about or proposed was having the laptops available at public library locations. As I realized this week with a shift in energy in the community is that we have also now entered into early voting process. So a lot of the public libraries are also engaging in early voting. So it's just a conversation that I had been trying to work out some tweaks to make sure if we needed to pivot and plan on different locations for that. So I hope to talk more about the locations with the co-chairs and the staff group tomorrow. And I do want to open it up in a moment for discussion or questions or insights about any of this that I'm sharing with you all right now, or any of that I've named. We also are in process of uploading some data from Elder Dakota, who we heard from a couple of times earlier on in the process, and who promised to send some documentation to follow up on research. I believe a good amount of that has information on James Wester Miller, which was something that was requested by Task Force member Ben Scales last week. And so I believe some of the information he has will be on that. And there's a lot in there about the YMI specifically. And so look for that to be uploaded by the next meeting. And then I'm also in process of creating a PSA, as mentioned by our Task Force member Bernard Oliphant last week, about having some radio coverage as well to reach community that way. And so I'll have a draft of a PSA to share with the co-chairs tomorrow, and to hopefully get that in rotation next week as well. And then the ask of you all when you're in the small groups, there was a request to exchange phone numbers. So when you're in your small groups today, if you all can designate somebody to collect all the phone numbers of the group and just send that to the co-chairs or myself, and we can make a master list tomorrow. That seemed the easiest way, rather than having a long email chain, is if you can just kind of compile that. And so we're just getting 3 emails, and you can send them to me at the end of your meeting today or by tomorrow, and I'll send that out in one contact sheet with your emails so that you all can convene and talk beyond this meeting. So those are the updates from last meeting as far as the action items go and the timeline and the progress. I did want to also just open it up for any questions or comments about that, or if there's any discussion that you all want to have at this time about the public comments that you received this week, and just open the floor up if there's anything you want to state or share.
Hey, Cortina, this is Catherine. I sent you a note right before we got started, so you might not have seen it yet. But as far as access to the libraries go, all of the branch libraries, that is to say excluding PAC, are now open at a limited capacity basis, and that includes computer use. So we're encouraging patrons to grab and go, but the computers are available for public use. So the laptops that I had mentioned, I discovered had sort of been farmed out around the county for folks to work from home with. So those aren't really available, but computer appointments are still definitely a thing at the public library branches. So
thank you for
and I sent some information about like the hours, because they're kind of funny right now, but
okay. Thank you for sharing that. And I'll just share out the locations that are on the list just briefly in case there's any input from the task force that I had shared. And this was a compilation of earlier conversations with the co-chair, and also adding a few based on proximity to the communities we're wanting to reach. So AV Tech, Minnie Jones Health Center, the Senior Opportunity Center, Asheville's Visitor Center with an emphasis on residential input, Black Mountain Library, Inca Canla Library or AV Tech Inca Campus, Fairview Library, Weaverville Library, Leicester Library, Swannanoa Library, West Asheville Library or Burton Street Community Center, Stevens Lee Center or Calvary Presbyterian Church, Hill Street Baptist Church or Isaac Dixon, and then all of the community engagement market locations, which would be Deaverview Community Center, Inca Middle, Aston Park Towers, Irwin Middle School, Big Ivy Community Center, which is in Barnardsville, Pisgah View Apartments, Arthur Eddington Center, Bartlett Arms Apartments, Shiloh or Rock Hill Church, Sycamore Temple Church, and ABCCM Hominy Valley Candler. So that's the list that we're kind of working with this moment with. It sounds like maybe the easiest access being to start with the library since the computers are available. So thank you for that update. One other question for you, Catherine, before we see if anybody else has another question. What's the best way for people to access the library computers? So I heard you mention an appointment. Is there a way that people can call in or can they walk in and just use it at that time? How does that work?
Starting this past Tuesday, the libraries are open at 50% capacity. We'll want to make sure we share those exact hours, again, because it's not the normal hours. But there is at least one day, I want to say it's Tuesdays, that we're open from 2 to 7. And so there is some afternoon or early evening access as well. But I put that information in the link in the email I sent you.
Okay.
But yeah, just walk right in.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments about that process or updates that I shared or public comments at this time from the task force? Or questions? And welcome, Mr. Oliphant.
Thank you. I'm paying attention.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, Madam Chair, for I missed the first link, but Deborah got it corrected. Thank you.
Awesome. All righty. So with no questions, and Mr. Bernard, are you able to mute yourself by chance?
Yes.
A little bit of an echo. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move along in the agenda and move into the layout and the design of the town hall and call-in sessions. So at this time, I want to welcome on Lillian to share the graphic with us, which at the same time, you can kind of see the method that's being proposed for people to call in and the time with a little more context. And hopefully task force members have had a chance to look at the press release draft, so we'll touch on that. So I want to also just pull this up to have this ready for you all to view. And while I'm pulling this up, Lillian, I want to go ahead and welcome you on. Welcome to unmute and share.
Thank you so much, and happy first day of early voting, everyone. Our team has been working to identify or to create this invitation for the organizations to share out both in a digital format and in a hard copy format. Once this group is able to, once this group feels good about the invitation, the invite card final there, once we are able to feel good about the language that we have here, we will translate this into Spanish as well, so that we've got it in that format. But as you see, we've got the dates there, we've got the phone number and the code to enter. We also have the way to text your way in or just email the public input information. The QR code there will take you to the meeting to watch it in progress. And the number at the bottom, you'll see call 828-250-4102 for info on public spaces where computer access has been arranged. That is the phone number for Rashida McDaniels. And so what we can do is have Rashida connect people to the library if that's the most appropriate place, or we can help work to identify a way to get a device to a location that would work for that person. That way we don't have to try and run devices all around the county, but we can also create a tailored response for any individual who needs some additional help. And if anyone knows Rashida, she can make things happen. So that is our solution. And it also helps us avoid inviting people to go to publicinput.com if they're not comfortable using computer devices. Rashida can help get them set up and walk them through how to participate in the way that meets their needs.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Lillian and Rashida, for that work and for that plan. I want to open it up. I'll stop sharing my screen for just a moment. I also will share this here in the chat box for the task force members, but I'll stop sharing just for you all to see if there are any questions about that or suggestions about that plan that Lillian just shared about the virtual town halls or how people can engage. Yeah, I saw some thumbs up. It seems like people are, can we just give your consensus if you feel like you're good with that moving forward? Just give a thumbs up. Yeah.
I did.
Thank you.
I did have one question, Lillian, if that's okay. This is Liz Harper. Is that call in to the meeting to speak live? I know City Council people are having to sign up kind of a day in advance. I just want to clarify that you can call in and you're in queue automatically during the meeting.
That's correct.
Okay.
Right. That was a question that I had. So the answer to that, and I also wanted to ask another question of you, Lillian. Would you all be able to, even if it's just bullet points, just the process that you verbally laid out for us of how people can engage and like what's the plan, if this, then that type thing? So just those scenarios you named, if somebody doesn't feel comfortable inputting their information online, or if somebody needs a laptop, just those steps. So if we get those questions, we can just have those talking points.
The phone number at the bottom is the phone number for Rashida McDaniel, and she is the one-stop shop to help solve any issue that may arise, be it needing a device or wanting to know the hours at the library that's closest to them so that they can access a device there, whether it's not wanting to participate during the call but wanting to provide public comment, or whether it's, how to provide comment via email for that opportunity. And so that was an offering that Rashida made to this team to help make sure that everyone who has a desire to participate in the process has an opportunity to do so in the way that meets their needs in the best manner possible.
Great. And I think with that being said, just to refer back to the naming of locations, that maybe we do focus on the libraries as places to drive people that need access to the computers. And then if it sounds like if there are people in specific communities or neighborhoods that we know about or that contact us, that we can get laptops or get connected with a resource that we can reach out to Rashida for that.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll make it happen.
And does that plan sound okay to task force members? Is there any reason that we should consider doing it any different way? Okay, I see thumbs up. Okay, great. All right, so with that, I think let's move into the press release. Do you want me to present the screen, or do you just want to open it up to see if people have thoughts or feedback about it?
The only change that I was going to offer to the press release is just the very last line where it says need access to a computer, and we'll take that and we'll input Rashida's phone number there so that people can call and get that individual and targeted support.
Great, thank you. Are there any comments or thoughts from the task force members at this time on the press release? And I'm also looking to the co-chairs. Do we need to do do we need to do an official vote for the press release? I believe last time we did it consensus and actually we did that via email and had quorum. But yes, as far as getting people's consent, just want to check in on the best way to do that.
Can we just do this?
We could do that as long as we can see everybody. That people feel good with the press release. I'm going to scroll so I can see. Okay. And Savannah, since you're on the phone, would you be able to come off mute and just also chime in your consent about the town hall design in the press release?
I consent. I think it sounds great, and I'm excited.
Okay, great. Just wanted to check. Okay.
Thumbs up.
So thank you, Essie. Same thing. Yes, you were both on the phone. Okay, so with that being said, I think those are all the questions for you, Lillian. I have some more design questions that I want to facilitate through with the task force members. But was there anything else you wanted to touch on community engagement wise?
No, I just want to thank you all for your commitment to ensuring that we take every opportunity to involve the community in this. It's fun to have that level of support. So thank you.
Thank you for your work. Thank you. Okay, so a few other questions for consideration as far as the design of the town hall meetings, the virtual town hall meetings that'll be once again on the 22nd and 29th. I wanted to come to you all with just a few things for us to think about as far as how that will play out. As you saw on the invite, the time that was listed was from 4:45 to 6. And that first 15 minutes would give us the opportunity to do roll call and move through the approval of the minutes and just open it up in case there were any other items of business to cover during the meeting at that time. And essentially at 4:45, the call lines would open to where people would be able to call in and offer their questions or comments live. And so a question for you all with that is, or two questions I'll start with and then open it up to just have discussion and get any input, is how much time are we going to allot per caller? And just bearing in mind that the less time that people have, the more callers you can hear from, the more time people have, the more in depth they can go. But once again, the less people you can hear from. So that's a consideration. And then the other question there is, how should callers identify themselves? So is there a certain way that you want people to introduce themselves as a method to really hear from and to understand who's calling in, since we are doing this virtually? Otherwise, we'd be able to see faces and maybe make connections that way. But so that's just a consideration is, for example, when people call in, do you want them to offer their name and their neighborhood or the community they live in, or whatever that might be? And then the easiest thing as far as process is to have people touch on one of the 3 R's in their response, but maybe still, however they're authentically sharing. One thing to keep in mind is that people will be on the phone, so there won't be presentation opportunities for people that will be calling in, but you can always encourage people to submit any designs or videos or things as have already been coming through to be submitted on the public input page.
Shirley Whitesides.
Yes, ma'am.
I think whoever's speaking should give their name. Looking at the public comments, some inappropriate language was used, and I noticed they did not give their names. So I think if they're going to speak, they should give their name.
And any other identifying information, Ms. Shirley, you think?
I think it would be good, the neighborhood, and it's okay to give their race so we'll know, are we meeting the average community or is it just one-sided? Because most of the comments I've seen are not really coming from the African-American community.
Mm-hmm. And I wondered if that was a point that the task force wanted to touch on, and maybe this is something for the small group, but just in effort to facilitate that conversation, just wanted to bring it in because this question had come up, I think, via email or just in conversation offline, is how do we make, in what ways will the task force be able to make the discerning decision? Because as Deb mentioned in another conversation we had, that it's not necessarily based off of majority vote that the task force is making this recommendation. And then also looking at the scope, it is to prioritize the African American community and experience. And so that's just a question for consideration, because the public input page, as we know, does not necessarily collect demographics technically, but there are inferences that are being made and being stated factually. So just that might be something for the task force to kind of grapple with.
Maybe they,
Ms. Shirley?
Shirley, okay, maybe they could give where they live or the neighborhood, and that would help. And you will find out if it's coming from central, west, east, north, Asheville.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ms. Shirley. Mr. Bernard, and then Ms. Simmons after Mr. Bernard.
Can I make a comment too?
Yep, I'll put you up after Ms. Simmons, Savannah. Mr. Bernard, you're next.
As Ms. Whiteside has indicated, and this is such a database society right now,
And
we need
just
to collect demographics.
one quick thing, if I may, if you're not speaking, if y'all can mute yourselves. Mr. Bernard, I wanted to hear what you were saying, but there is a bad echo because we had a couple people off mute. Can you share that again, please, if you don't mind?
Demographics is critical, and we need to collect demographics somehow, especially if we want to be inclusive and document our inclusive responses and recommendation. We need to base it on something other than we heard. We need to collect clear demographic data.
Great, and thank you, Ashley. I'm reading from the chat box that Ashley Trainum Carson with the city's communication team says that you can add a demographic question to public input. So that might be something for the task force to consider and discuss, whether now or otherwise, if you all want to add that question in to public input. And then maybe also it sounds like that being a question that's asked in some manner, if it's neighborhood or naming ethnicity in the town halls, feels important to capture also. Okay. Other Miss Simmons, I know you were up next, so I want to give the mic to you, and then after you, Savannah.
I think it would be good if we could know if they are connected with any particular group, organization, or association, such as Ministerial Alliance, NAACP, retired educators, etc.
So like a community association, like what are they associated with in community?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Savannah?
Hey, I just wanted to say that I agree with everyone that's saying should add a demographic question to when people are responding in the town hall and then online to our public comment process, because I really think it's important for us to be practicing equity rather than equality right now, and really centering the voices of the people who we usually don't get to hear from as often and who tend to get left behind more often in Asheville. And then I also think that just having the neighborhood that you're from could be an issue because of the fact that, one, Asheville is predominantly white, and it's also becoming more and more gentrified. So even if there are neighborhoods that have been like historically places of color, it could not be that way anymore. And so you won't really know who is who just by where they're living, clearly. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Savannah. Does the task force feel compelled at this time to make that decision collectively about adding?
I have a comment, excuse me. I have a comment, Cortina, if I could, before we do that. This is Andrea.
Yeah, okay. I think that's
okay. Yes, Deborah emailed me and said that alternates are allowed to speak.
Yeah, I think
okay, cool. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I was trying to raise my hand, but it's hard.
I didn't see you.
I know. I'm sorry for interrupting you. I just wanted to ask our lawyers or lawyer, maybe Brad, if we are getting into, when we ask for demographics, I know that on all the forms I've ever filled out that these are usually optional, and it's to prevent racial profiling or discrimination. That's part of my question. The other part of my question is, I noticed a lot of the comments that are not from a particular group that were before, that were named as a certain group of voices, you know, just up until last week and before. That these are also taxpayer voices. And so since we are in part making a recommendation that's going to be affecting the stewardship of taxpayers' dollars, I would like to advise that we be very careful to try. I know that the task force is assigned to specifically amplify certain voices, but it just seems like there's a little bit of a slippery slope here that we're treading on, where it's important that all voices be heard, and maybe we want to make sure that we pull out voices who aren't usually represented and heard, and I hear that. I just don't want it to come across as excluding certain voices based on the color of their skin, because that is a similar problem that we're trying to get away from as a society. So hopefully that's coming across clearly, but the one concern with putting it on the form or having people state that in a call is with regards to privacy. And I think that might be a legal concern that Brad might be able to address. Thank you.
Brad, did you want to add to that? I saw you come on. Yeah.
Could I possibly say something after Brad?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, see that.
Yes, so let me address this by saying, from a purely legal standpoint, if you are attempting to collect information regarding someone's race or gender or these types of personal identification data points, I think it might be a good idea for you to consider the allowance for someone not to answer or choose not to answer. There is nothing that's going to get you into legal trouble just asking for a voluntary option for people to identify themselves as they see fit. However, there certainly, I think, would be a good reason for you to give them an option to not answer. Certainly, that's going to perhaps not give you as much data as you want, but I believe it would give people the option to maintain the privacy if they wanted to do so. Beyond that, and how you effectuate this, I think, is much more of a practical consideration than a legal one in determining how much data and what particular data you're going to want to collect. But I think it might be beneficial for you to give people the option to not answer, even though you may decide you still want to ask the question.
Thank you for that insight, Brad. I also wanted to read from the chat box that Ashley follows up and says, I can add zip code and it will provide a map for comments going forward. And so again, I want to reflect that question to the task force members and see, would geography be something that you all would want to use as an indicator and a way to imply groups or representation, or do you feel that you want to potentially decide now or discuss now adding the ethnicity option to the public input form? Because that I would recommend that maybe sooner rather than later, especially as we move into the virtual town halls next week. We might be asking for people to engage even more than they have up until this point. And so now feels like maybe a good time for that decision to be made, or maybe at least happen before the next meeting. And that way you all know how we're moving forward with that.
Ms. Cortina, this is David King. May I make a comment?
Please.
As far as the callers, there's no way to determine who's going to call and not call anyway. I don't know that we have any screening method. So, as far as race or whatever, I think the main thing would be that if we have callers call in with a well thought out statement on what their position is, and it's respectful, let's take it, put it into consideration. If we get callers who are not respectful and they want to rant, those should not be entered in and should not be. I mean, I don't think we should give someone 3 minutes to rant. If you've got a legitimate position and it's respectful and they want to present it, that's one thing. But I think we need to be aware that, even in county commission, you weren't allowed to come in and rant. You could come in and state your position in a manner that was respectful to the board and to the audience.
Thank you. And my apologies owed to Essie. I did neglect to keep you in the stack, so I want to give you the floor and then see if there are any comments to what either of you have shared before we take another comment. So Essie, do you want to unmute yourself if you're able to?
For the call-ins, we won't necessarily know what they're going to say until they say it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like really hard to like figure out if someone's going to rant or not. Like maybe if we can state something like please don't rant, like in a nice something way, like that would be good. And I was gonna basically say what Brad was saying. I think it's really good for people to have the option to state their race and like where they like their place that they live in Asheville or not. But I think with this task force, having race be stated is really important because I think that there's a certain demographic that voice is not heard. They're the type of people possibly who don't come to the task force and don't like call in and give their opinion.
Understood. Thank you, Essie. David King, did you have another comment?
Yes, in response to that, no, you don't know who might call in and rant, but you don't let them go on for 3 minutes ranting. The chair or someone cuts that time off. I want to hear thoughtful comments, but we don't want to hear someone rant or abuse this group.
Thank you. And so a couple questions here, and I'm glad we're getting to some good conversation because this will help make sure we have a design that works when we invite the public in. So basically what I'm hearing from task member David King is there's a concern about people using up their 3 minutes to basically call in and complain and to potentially be negative and harmful with their speech to task force or otherwise. And what can be a process that we put in place to kindly facilitate that time not being a full 3 minutes and to allow for other people to speak. Now, one thing that I will say before I open it up to comments, I see your hand, Brad, but I do, from a facilitation perspective and just kind of being someone who's a little more, who's neutral in this process, I do want to recommend that when people are calling in, that the parameters that we set up for people to engage in the conversation and give their inputs can stay somewhat objective for you all as task force, because I do think cutting someone off if they're sharing in a particular way does maybe imply bias or could imply bias. And so I'm just curious if there's a very particular way that you all want people to present and share that can be neutral across the board and that will allow people to share in a way that allows them to say what they need to say. And also the other part of that question, I guess, too, is it sounds like, is there a requirement or are there guidelines of what you want people to call in about? And so it sounds like it might be a prioritization of the African-American community or experience in your spoken response, as opposed to you calling in to complain that maybe this isn't the town hall for that. And so I think that kind of context is important, because then I can say that, or the co-chairs can say that at the beginning and make sure that everybody's on the same page about what kind of calls you want to receive. So thank you, David King, for bringing that in. Did you have another comment?
Ms. Cortina, let me say one more thing on that. When I say I'm talking about once someone becomes abusive and using inappropriate language, that is, if they are emotional about it, that's fine. But they just need to not become abusive or use abusive language. That's basically all I'm saying.
Thank you. And let's kind of stay in the stack real quick if we can, so that everybody can speak. So Miss Shirley, I'm going to get you right after Brad, who had his hand up, and I want to hear from him before he forgets.
And let me apologize. I know you're probably all sick of hearing from me tonight, but to offer a recommendation to you on this point, I think these are excellent concerns. I can't speak for the county, but I can tell you that the city council has very particular written rules of decorum that we ask all callers and public commenters to abide by. You could certainly take those rules and adapt them to your purpose. They are intended to protect the integrity of the process, to keep people respectful and on message, but allowing you to set general parameters that are viewpoint neutral in order to balance the concerns of maintaining people's First Amendment rights in these situations. You want to set rules about being respectful and courteous and sticking to the time limit without setting rules that limit someone's ability to view their point one way or another. So I would suggest with perhaps the help of your staff liaisons, we can take the rules that the city council or the county commission use and adopt that quickly to your purpose. And those can be published and then even read perhaps before the call-in, so that if those are violated at that point, then the chair is well within their rights to be able to end calls if they get out of hand.
Thank you, Brad, for that. Miss Shirley, you had something?
Shirley W. Whitesides. Will the people calling in, are you going to break it up into the 3 categories, or anyone can call based on relocating, removing, or refurbishing? Are you going to break it into the calls so many at a certain time, or they just call whoever calls, state their concern?
Got you. Is that question for me, Miss Shirley? Or for
anybody?
Anybody, yeah. Deb, you have your hand up. You want to answer that? You're on mute. You're muted.
I do think that there ought to be a few minutes of introduction on the role of the task force, what we were charged with, and what it would be helpful to hear from the community. For instance, sticking to the 3 issues, and that we are to prioritize African American voices. I think those are both things would be good to say up front. It might, are there some educational opportunities? It might be helpful to say we've had however 8 meetings, and these 2 weeks are for public comment. Maybe that's something we talk about tomorrow in the planning. And I don't know what other task force thinks is a baseline educational process for the community to know about what we've been doing.
I want to offer a point to that, just being mindful of time, and there's so much good conversation on this in the chat box. So I think one thing that we could plan on doing is having a draft of our kind of agreements or guidelines to send out to the task force after our planning meeting tomorrow, so that we can review the practice of the city council. Just maybe have that on a document, as well as those other 2 parameters that you just named, co-chair Deb Miles. And then from there, we can also just ask people also if they have any additional follow-up to share, or anything else that you all might want to have us ask them or have them say when they come online. So what we could do is, if you have anything to add, if you'll email me, and that way I can take those thoughts and or the co-chairs, and we can take that into our meeting tomorrow and come up with a good overview of that. And then that can be shared at the beginning of the public input section in the meeting next week. Mr. Bernard, I see you might have a comment.
Yes, I'm reflecting back on Mr. King's comment.
Mm-hmm.
In order to assist with abbreviating some of the long input from the community, we probably need to define our 3 primary options. What the meaning of relocation is, what the meaning of removal is, and what the meaning of repurposing is. And if there's any way we can put that out to the public in advance, it will assist us in analyzing what they are trying to say if they aren't extremely clear in what they mean to say. And I also want to thank Brad for always being with us and for saying some of the things we wanted to say in a logistical manner. Thank you, Brad.
Ms. Cortina, this is David again, David King.
David King, and then Andrea, I see your hand.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, David King. You're up first after Andrea will go after you.
Okay. Me?
Yeah, it's on you. You got it.
Okay. Bernard's right. And when I was talking about a rant, if people will get off of the subject, Ms. Deborah a minute ago mentioned that, the three charges we have. It needs to be clear that that's what they're to discuss are those three things, because I've known people to come in and start talking about things totally unrelated to what they're supposed to be talking about. And that's what I mean by rant, is we need them, if they're calling in, don't tell us about what's going on in Seattle. Don't talk to us about what's going on elsewhere. Just stick to the three options we're talking about.
Understood. And that could be framed something along the lines of relevant conversation to the process and then naming those three options. One other thing I did want to offer in process just really quickly, and then I'll give the floor to you, Andrea. But to Mr. Bernard's point about the definition of remove, relocate, or repurpose, that if that could be a charge for the small groups, whenever you all break into small groups here in just a moment, if you might spend time talking about that amongst yourselves of some context given, so that can be really clearly defined and maybe shared as context when we are inviting community to come in, to call in. And I also will share just really quickly that Co-Chair Deb Miles also provided a little bit of context, which I don't know if you can share anything about how you provided that context for each of the decisions, Deb, at some point. But from what I see, remove is being defined as take apart. Relocate is being defined as move to a different location, and then repurpose was make the structure different. And that's kind of what you had in parentheses for each of those decisions. So that's a short version, but maybe if you all wanted to spend time in small groups talking about that, that's a suggestion. And then if we can grab Andrea real quick, Mr. Bernard, and I'll come right back to you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. The fourth option also still is something that's on some people's minds, including Mr. Bacote, who spoke and mentioned it twice during his first talk with us, was the option of not doing anything to it. And just to kind of bring his voice back into it. And he gave some pretty good reasons as to why he thought that was a good option. I think that Brad also mentioned that fourth option today. And then also with regards to freedom of speech, that might be, this is a town hall about the Vance Monument Task Force and what the Vance Monument specific topic, that might come up. And from any different voice in our community that could possibly come up. So I'm not sure how we want to word that if we do.
Thank you for that. Mr. Bernard?
When we talk about removal, most of the comments I've heard is simply destroy and eliminate.
And I just one other point on that, and Deb, I see your hand, that it would be great to continue to use the language so that for you all's purposes, it's really clear to you where they fall in the language that you're being charged with using, because that seems like something to be explicitly stated in your recommendations report. So I think the more that we can use that as people are commenting, because it could also be relative, which is something Dakisha named about what we consider to be a rant. Just remembering that sometimes things are not as objective and clearly understood by all in the same way. So Deb, I want to give you the mic, and then maybe we do a round of just our action items so that I can give y'all as much time as you need in small groups. I'll give you the mic. You're on mute, Deb, by the way.
I know we're running out of time, but I feel like this is something we started at the beginning, and here we are in session 8. We're still reviewing it. When I look at these 4 whereases from the city and the county, I don't see any way that we leave it as it is. It very specifically says whereas it is the intent of the governing boards that these monuments be replaced or altered in such a manner as to honor the local history of African Americans. There's no way to leave the monument as it is and accomplish that. I don't know, Brad, if you want to speak to that.
So let's maybe see about spending it seems like we have another at least 5 minutes to do any other comments and adjourn. So maybe let's keep any other comments brief if possible. But Brad, you could share.
Certainly. I think that Ms. Miles has read that 100% correctly in that without putting words into the elected officials' mouths, I think that they had a clear intent to do something. I believe that this task force is primarily charged with determining which of those 3 options that were provided it would recommend based upon your expertise and your input from the community. It is not my goal as an attorney to preclude any of your options. Certainly if this group determined that it wanted to move forward with a do nothing option, then I think it's within your purview to do that. But I believe reading the document, there was a clear indication about some action as opposed to no action may have been favored by the electeds. But again, I don't want to put words into their mouths.
Understood.
Can I make a comment as well really quick?
Yes, I saw your hand virtually. Go ahead, Savannah.
Cool. I wanted to say that I agree with Deborah about what she was saying about how I don't really see it being an option to not remove it or repurpose it because of the fact that we've been tasked with doing this, and this is the whole reason why I've been meeting as a task force is to decide what of those options to do. And I also wanted to bring it back. I remember, I think Ben had brought up something about like legal implications, but I thought that we'd already addressed legal implications when the city made it a public health thing. And because of that, it applied that we were able to remove the monument without having legal implications because now it's a problem for people's health. I feel like mental health, and then in turn that leads to like physical health problems and X, Y, and Z. So for me, it really feels as though we should be just listening to the community that we've been tasked to listen to, which is the African American community and the community of color. And then I don't really feel like we need to put certain side away for people to say how they feel about one option versus another, because once again, it's not an equality thing, it's an equity thing. So let's say that a majority of the people, just throwing it out there, who call in, who are people of color, do not want to repurpose it. I don't think that they had set aside like 5 minutes to hear from the one person who does, because we're not trying to equally weigh everyone's voices and opinions. We're trying to get a pool of what the most affected by this monument feel should happen and then do what they want us to do. So that's what I think is important.
Thank you for your words and adding that in, Savannah. And with that, I think that provides a really good segue for the small groups, because hopefully more of those concentrated conversations and discussions that Savannah brought in can happen within those 3 categories that the co-chairs outlined for you all. So in the chat box, task force members, if you need easy access to the links for the next meeting, I believe Nia had those in there earlier. And just really quickly to name the groups, if you all want to just reference this link in your chat box according to the group that you're in. We have the Remove Small Group with Catherine, David, Savannah, and Ms. Orlean. Relocate with Lonnie, Dennis, Liz, and Ms. Deborah. And then Repurpose would be Ben, Bernard, Essie, and Ms. Shirley. And so I want to turn it over to the co-chairs. Is there any other instruction for the task force members or any other commentary before we move to adjournment and that small group time with what time remains? DK, did you have something? I saw you come on. Okay, sorry, you came on and you're unmuted. Okay, so I'll turn it over to you, co-chairs, at this time, if there's anything you want to add before you adjourn. That's what I have. Thank you.
I really appreciate everybody's time and effort and suggestions and ideas this evening. We will be meeting tomorrow for our planning session at 2:00. So if you still have some things that you would like to share with us, please email us those thoughts, and we can take them under consideration and get all of this back out to you before our next meeting. I'd like to remind everybody again to follow your links once we adjourn. Is there anything else before I do the roll call for adjournment? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, please. And please state your name.
Liz Harper, motion to adjourn.
Please give me a second.
Shirley
Someone
W.
please
Whiteside, second the motion.
Thank you. It's been motioned, properly second, that we adjourn the meeting. I will do the roll call for the vote at this time. Co-Chair Deborah Miles. Yay or nay?
Yay.
Catherine Calhoun Cutshall.
Yay.
Dennis Magnet.
Aye.
Savannah Gibson.
Aye.
Elizabeth Harper.
Aye.
Essie Hutchison.
Aye.
David King.
Aye.
Bernard Oliphant. Ben Scales.
Aye.
Shirley Whitesides.
Aye.
I think the ayes have it. The most, we will adjourn the meeting. It is now, excuse me, did I fail to call somebody's name? Did I see your hand?
No, I think we were just waving bye to each other. We were all just saying, see you next time.
But hearing all of that, the meeting is now adjourned. It is 5:42 p.m. This October 15th, 2020. Good night.